Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for NCEA's webinar, Helping Your Students Navigate the College Admissions Process. I'm Andrea Kopp, Manager of Educational Resources for NCEA, and I'm happy to host this webinar for you this evening. Before we begin, please know that all your microphone connections have been muted. If you have questions during today's presentation, please send those through the question box that appears in your GoToWebinar panel. To ask a question, use your mouse to click into the blank box area, type your question using your keyboard, and then click Send. The webinar presentation will last about 45 minutes, and any questions you have asked will be addressed in the remaining time. Later this evening, you will receive an email asking you to complete a brief evaluation about this webinar, and I thank you in advance for providing us with feedback about today's webinar. For those of you who are attending this webinar live, information about creating a certificate of attendance will also be forwarded to you later this evening. We will send you another email in the next business day or two with instructions on accessing this recorded webinar and presentation files. Let's begin by asking for the intercession of our Blessed Mother. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Now, I wish to introduce Lyle Alba, founder of Higher Admission, and Terry Kazina, Director of Admissions for LaRoche College. They'll be our presenters this evening. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming this afternoon. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm sure Terry does too. Let's jump right in. We have a lot to cover, so I'll just give you a brief overview of the agenda. Terry and I will introduce each other, introduce ourselves, and then I'll talk about something I call the big gift, which that's kind of, you can't tell from the words there what it is, but I'll definitely get into that. I'll go on to talk about, and what I'll do is I'll do the initial slide discussion, and after I finish with each slide, Terry will come in and give the perspective from the college admissions office and comment on, add to what I said and comment or question anything that I said. So we'll go from the big gift to talking about what colleges want, and then we'll move on to talk about what students want, and then we'll both talk about how the application is in the way of colleges getting what they want and of students getting what they want. And we'll continue on to talk about a better way forward that I think can solve the problems for both the schools and the students. And finally, we'll have a question period. I want to say up front that the theme today is access and affordability. And when I talk about access and affordability, when Terry and I talk about access and affordability today, we're talking, most people think of that in terms of student access to schools and affordability of schools. Today we'll be talking about it from both sides of the table. So we'll talk about students' access and affordability, but we'll also talk about colleges' access to students and affordable access to students, because really when we get down to it, we'll show you that the application is somewhat in the way of those two groups having affordable access to each other. And lastly, just in an introductory way, I want to say that a lot of, from my side, not so much Terry's, but from my side today, I'll be talking in kind of what I consider a little bit cold way of economic facts about college access and affordability, and so that we don't need to say every time I say something about some number that I know that there's more involved and much, much more involved than just money in the college admissions process and college selection and access and affordability. But today we're just mostly focusing, or I will be, a lot of what I say will be kind of just economics of the transaction. So even words like transaction are almost never used in the college admissions process, but I'll be using words like that. It's not that I don't know that there's a lot more to it than that. So let's just move on then to our introductions. I'll go first since I'm already talking, and out of that whole list there, all I want to say is that the three things I want to focus on just briefly is that I'm a first-generation college student, so I had a lot of trouble with access and affordability. I found my way around it, and things turned out well for me, but I have an intimate knowledge of the problems with access and affordability. from my own experience, and then I'll mention my daughter is a freshman in college, so I went through an entirely different angle with her when she was applying last year. She was a very different situation than I was in, but I also have got insight there. And then finally, I'm the founder of Higher Admission, and I've been working on that 24/7 for the last 18 months, total immersion into the college admissions process, building a platform and trying to get the word out about the platform to market it. So that's what's important about me for today. Terry, how about you?
I like also, just like Lau, first generation college student, and as you can see by the 3 institutions I've attended, the first 2 as an undergraduate student, the third, Duquesne, as a graduate student, that for students sometimes the path to go to school and to ultimately graduate and do those things is not always straight. Sometimes there are curves in the roads, and as counselors, I'm sure you're aware of that. And I'm I think a good example of someone who had to take a number of curves to eventually get to their goal. The other part really would be, you know, I've been in the admissions profession now for 40 years, 30 of those in private higher education. So I think some of the things that I can share from my seat as an admissions professional is things that you work with every day as counselors, but at the same time, it's always good to hear it from this side of the aisle. Thank you.
So the first thing I want to talk about is what I call the big gift. I put the amount up there between $100,000 and $300,000, and that's basically what somebody's going to pay for all in for a 4-year college education. When you add in tuition, room and board, and fees, it's coming in. It can be a little bit lower, and in some cases it can be a little bit higher than that, which is kind of unbelievable. But I call it a gift because it's given to these college-bound seniors. I know that most people don't think of it this way, and most parents and students don't necessarily think of it this way, but this 18-year-old college-bound senior is getting a gift, and the source of that, the sources of that gift are taxpayers. So taxpayers, if you're moving from left to right on the slide, taxpayers provide the state and federal grants that make up a big part of students' gift. And then there's foundation scholarships, and I know that that's a relatively small part that makes up the big gift, but it's important, and I just didn't want to leave it out. They're few and far between, but some students obviously do get them. And then the third and fourth part of the gift, student loans and savings, those can come from either the parents. Obviously, the parents can take out student loans or provide their savings, or it come from somebody I call the future self, and that's if the student is spending his or her own savings or taking out loans in his or her own name, the future student is going to not have those savings or is going to have to pay those back after graduation. So this enormous gift we give to these college-bound seniors, and this is probably going to be the second biggest expenditure they ever make in their life. You know, the house will be the biggest most likely, but they'll be making that expenditure when they're much older and much more mature, and so they'll have a different perspective. And an 18-year-old they're not well known for making the greatest decisions or having the greatest judgment. So we're as a society, we're giving them a lot and asking them. We're saying, here's a blank check for $100,000 to $300,000. Go get an education that's going to really determine your future. So it's a lot to ask, a lot to give them, and then a lot of responsibility to ask them. And I think that we'd all be better off if somehow we could get it across to them that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Nobody's ever going to offer this to them again, and just get them to take it as seriously as possible. I know that's an uphill climb, but another important part of the big gift that I want to say is you see on the slide there are no arrows connecting the gift to any particular college, and I think there's a bit of confusion and not necessarily among counselors, but definitely among parents and students, that because colleges bundle the gift and provide the financial aid package come April or May or even March, there's a misperception that this part of the gift comes from colleges, and it doesn't. I mean, these kids, this gift is fungible between any college. So the student is bringing an enormous asset to whichever college they decide, and the colleges can't access it without enrolling the student. What are your thoughts on that, Terry?
It's true that that's, the student is bringing all of those things, obviously, for them based on their need and filling out the appropriate forms for the financial aid offices to be able to determine their need for a variety of those things you see. And I know we'll talk about it, but the other thing that is part of that big gift is institutional aid. That might be a grant that the college or university is able to offer that student. It might be a merit award based on the student's academic performance, standardized test scores, leadership, whatever it might be. And that also can be part of that big gift that that institution is saying to that student, we really, really would like to have you as part of our community. And basically by them knowing and maybe being aware that, hey, this institution does have something for me, both academically, but also on the financial aid side, can be very, very helpful to them. Thank you.
Sure, and I'll just add quickly to what Terry said. We really will get to that institutional aid in this discussion, and we'll talk about it a lot because it's essential to it. But that is unique to whichever school. So the schools provide, that does come from the school. So this part of the gift is just fungible between schools. And we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll briefly talk about what colleges want. I think that a lot of times so much of the literature, and by that I mean the popular literature and the press, and just the atmosphere is all about what students want from college and how they're going to get into their REACH school. And I'll talk more about the REACH school issues and things like that down the road. But colleges really want a couple things too. First of all, they want that big gift. Outside of the top few colleges with the enormous endowments such as Harvard or something, who I think could probably offer free tuition for all time now and never go broke. But outside of those few, colleges need those tuition dollars. That's what they're surviving on. It's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's the way it is. They need that big gift, and they can't get it without the student enrolling. So that's one thing that colleges want. But the other thing I think that gets a little bit less emphasis, and it's going to be important for today's discussion, is they want that student's test grades and test scores and personal characteristics. So they want I'll call it the credentials that student brings, because you know this, the better the students, the better their rankings are, the better the students, the better their professors are. It's how a good college stays in their position, in their tier, or if they can attract better students with better test scores, it's how they can move up a tier, and they risk moving down in their tier if their average SAT scores, for example, slip or something. So those schools really want those grades and test scores, and they also want to have a diverse and interesting student body. So they want personal characteristics. They want students, and you guys all know this from all the applications that you go through. So colleges want those things. And they're willing to compete for them. And I have an example of that is my daughter, when she was applying to colleges last year, she had very high credentials, and I didn't really know to what degree colleges were competing for those credentials, but her three safety schools were Clemson, Miami of Ohio, and University of Tennessee. And in her admissions letters, from Clemson, she got offered $15,000 in merit aid. From University of Tennessee, $18,000, and from Miami of Ohio, $11,000. And essentially, what those schools, she and I were kind of flabbergasted by this. We didn't realize to the degree they were doing this, but they were essentially trying to buy her credentials. University of Tennessee, just looking for out-of-state students to up their average SAT scores. So schools are really willing to compete for those credentials, and for reasons that make a lot of sense to them. The better students they have, the better alumni they're going to have, a better graduation rate, and the student body is really part of their brand and their product. But would you agree with that, Terry?
Yeah, I would, Lau, and I think it's important that from the admissions side, when we're reviewing a folder or we're interviewing a student, we like to know what that student is going to be able to bring to our institution. What have they been doing in respect to their personal life, whether it be in the high school, whether it be outside the high school? What have they been involved in? So those kinds of things can help shape and permit us as an institution to be a better institution, to be more giving, to do those kinds of things. Obviously, as Lyle mentioned, grades and test scores for many institutions really dictate, what kind of merit aid that an institution can offer. The better the student, the better the test scores, the better merit award that probably will be offered that student. But again, the grades and the test scores are part of it, but it also is what are those personal characteristics that student can bring to the institution. I always like to say to students, what have you been involved in? And they say, well, I like to fish. And you think, oh, okay. And they say, do you have a fishing team or a club that's involved with that? And we may say no. And I always say to students, you establishing that club, that organization on campus because of your interest in it can actually be your legacy to the institution. It may not early on be financial, but that your legacy can be what you've brought to the institution, what you've helped to establish, and for that to carry on once you're gone. Thank you.
So I would also, I want to add just one other thing, that the idea that college and universities want these grades and test scores and these personal characteristics of the overall package of the student. This goes on at every tier. At the highest tier of colleges, an underrepresented minority is a good example, because there are only so many minority students out there. That's why they're in the minority. And top underrepresented minority students get competed on fiercely by top colleges. Colleges that you wouldn't think would be competing for students, they want the best of each group that they want on campus, because a diverse student body is important to them. So schools will compete more than I think is widely known, and some schools don't try to hide the fact, I think, almost to some extent. And also briefly here, there's no perfect place in this presentation to talk about the problem with reach schools and reach students, but I think this is the best possible place. And I just want to briefly mention that there's a problem. I think I said this a little bit earlier. All the discussion in the press and everything that parents and students hear about, and I'm sure as counselors you just get inundated with, how am I going to get into this reach school? Do I have to have, the perfect essay, use the perfect words in my essay, have the perfect activities, etc. And there's too much emphasis on reach schools, and I think what it does is it limits the amount. Because if a student goes to their reach school, they do get in and they go to their reach school, it ends up being maybe not the best fit for them, both financially and just personally. And I say that from research I've read and from personal experience. The price is going to be higher. If a student is going to a reach school, if they just went to a top match school in the next tier down, but that school is very likely to be just as good as their reach school, they stand to save an enormous amount of money. Like if my daughter would have went to University of Tennessee, would have saved us an enormous amount of money. Instead, she's at her reach school. But there's also Malcolm Gladwell recently wrote a book, David and Goliath, and there's a couple chapters in there that he talks about students, and students oftentimes they thrive and flourish better at their match school than their reach school. So at their match school, they're at the top of the heap. And what a better atmosphere to be in than to be at your reach school and either be in the middle or towards the bottom of the heap. It's just the kids that are at the match school end up being more confident and just doing better. And there's been long longitudinal studies showing that. So I just wanted to add that in. It's something to keep in mind, because we're going to be talking about money, and to sum that up, the reach school is going to be more expensive than the match school. So. We can now talk about what students want, and that's a pretty easy one. We're not going to talk about what students want in the metaphysical sense, because none of us wants to delve into the brain of the 18-year-old and figure out what they want. I'm sure that's you guys probably have to do that a lot more than should be humanly expected. But students are really simple in this regard. And when I'm talking about students here, to some extent, I mean students and parents, because 18-year-olds don't necessarily think about the other factors, but the parents certainly do. And so what do students want to know? They want to know, am I admitted? I'm sure that this is what you hear constantly. Did I get in? Where can I get in? How can I get in? So they want to know which schools want them. And then students, and to a greater extent, parents want to know what's it going to cost and how am I going to pay for it? And this is the merit aid part that Terry's already brought up really eloquently. And I just want to say that this is the part that the financial aid package is so complicated, because what gets bundled together is that big gift with the merit aid part. So families don't necessarily know where what money is coming from. They don't sort it all out until it's already into April and it's too late. It's a done deal. But it's important that if students, as early in the process as possible, students want to know how much and did I get in, students and parents. Would you agree with that, Terry?
Yeah, I think that I agree with that, in that when we speak with students, and we're particular, and many institutions are on rolling admissions as we are, and once that student applies, they want to know as quickly as possible where they stand with your particular institution. And I've worked at a number of institutions over the years, and whether it was a smaller institution like I'm working at now with LaRoche, I worked at a large public institution for a number of years, students still want to know as quickly as possible whether or not they're accepted. Are they and can they be part of the community that they're applying to? So that has not changed in the 40 years that I've been involved in enrollment. That is a question that is always forefront. They want to know, can I get in? Did I get in? And then that's when you start working with those next steps. Okay, thank you.
So this is kind of getting to the point. Finally, maybe you're thinking. But when you think about what each side in this transaction wants, the application is really in the way. There are 4 million students out there and 3,000 approximately four-year colleges. So students want to know where they got in and how much it's going to cost, but they can only apply to 1% of 1% of those 3,000 colleges. So they only ever get to really find out which schools want them, and the schools can't offer them, give them the merit aid number until they find out the grades and test scores. So they can't find out, and then the whole financial aid package comes together. But they can't, the application blocks them up front from knowing that. They should, in an ideal world, they would know that in September instead of April. So, and I know that schools do have net price calculators, and so and students can kind of guess at where they can get in some cases that can be very accurate. But if you're a student, if you're an 18-year-old, and there's 3,000 colleges out there, you can only research so many colleges, and students don't go to use those net price calculators when they haven't even been accepted yet. So why would you bother? Why would a student bother to go through the trouble of using one of those if they haven't been accepted? And there are also students who their research on college is deficient. There could be a college right around the corner that they didn't hear about it from their friends. It's not on their radar, but it could be the perfect fit for them. And if they haven't heard from that college, they're not going to. The college may or may not show up in their research. So students are blocked from many colleges that might want them because they have to apply to them to find out if the college wants them. On the other side of the table, the colleges want affordable access to students. They want, if you're LaRoche in Pennsylvania, there's a ton of Catholic high school seniors in Pennsylvania that don't end up applying to LaRoche, even though LaRoche might be a very good fit for them. And there are a number of reasons. One of the biggest is that these students don't think they can afford LaRoche. The price on the website, the sticker price is high, and in any research they do, LaRoche is going to be a category of the more expensive than the state schools in the region. And so the student doesn't apply to the college, and until the student does apply, the college doesn't have good access to the student. And of course, to tell that student, look, you qualify for X amount of merit aid, and so our school is more affordable to you than you think, and it may be just as affordable to you or close to as affordable as the state school that you're going to apply to that you think you can afford. But so the colleges can't get that without the application. And then they do, of course, colleges buy lists and they do mailings and they go to college fairs and they meet with counselors, but that's an imprecise way. That's not, they're not getting a specific student's credentials and saying to that student, and so colleges are prevented from really doing rigorous and specific recruiting because they have to wait for the application. So if a college gets 5,000 applications, that's out of 4 million possible students. So the application is limiting extremely both sides. What do you think, Terry?
Well, yeah, I know that from our experience here at LaRoche is that when we're able to talk with a family and the student's able to share their credentials with us, whether it be verbally, whether it be with the transcript they've brought in, when they're able to do that, even though they've not applied yet, we're able to sit with them and talk with the family about what is their eligibility for that merit aid. Obviously, we get into other discussions about need-based aid, but with that, being able to have that conversation, which we don't have with every student in our inquiry pool, but those ones that we can, then we're able to help them. And until they apply, for a lot of those students who we don't get to speak with, until they apply, as Lyle said, we're not going to be able to let them know where they stand, at least in respect to their merit aid. And to have a vehicle that will permit us to go jump that loop from inquiry to, or having them know what that aid is before they apply, we have found can and is very beneficial because it puts us in the conversation, and that's all we want. We want to be part of that. We want to be part of that conversation because we think what we have in respect to an institution, in respect to a community here, those things are really, really good, and it could be a very good fit for that particular student. So that's the beauty of being able to get that information to that student before the application process. Thank you.
So my idea is to tear down the application wall, and the way I propose to do that is it would provide access on both ends, access and affordability for both colleges and students. So we tear down the wall, and the way it can work is that it's similar to the way that I used to do when I was a securities lawyer. Enormous business deals work this way. You state who you are up front, and you strike a deal before you go through the due diligence process. And a college application, if you in the business analogy, is kind of like the due diligence process. With that application, the student is proving who they are to the college, but it's a lot to do before the student even knows if they are who they say they are, they'd be admitted and offered a discount in the form of merit aid. So the idea would be that the student states who they are. They put on a platform, they enter their basic credentials, their grades, SAT, ACT, test scores, the things that the colleges need to make that initial cut. But they also enter their demographic information, and they enter a brief personal statement. So they enter this onto this platform, and the personal statement could be, because these are college seniors, this needs to be made as extremely easy and simple for them. So this, I'm thinking they know all these numbers, and actually we tested this extensively. It takes them about 15 minutes to do this, and that's because for their personal statement they use an essay that they've written for another place, like another college application or for the Common App. So there's this platform, this pool of students, and in order to make the students comfortable to do that, we would hide their name and address, and the colleges then, they would have access to these students, and they could sort these students any way they want. So LaRoche could sort by students that are either in Western Pennsylvania that are Catholics, for example, because they could sort by Catholic high schools, or they could sort by self-identified Catholics, and they could say to themselves, these students are above our floor, and we know that these Catholic students often, when we can get them in here, they have a really good experience, and they could send electronic invitations to those students that would include, because they know the students' grades and test scores, would include an offer of what they assume predict the merit aid would be if the student actually went through the whole application process. So the student would get an electronic letter from LaRoche, and it would tell them, here's your Merit Aid offer, and if you apply, LaRoche can't guarantee admission, but they would say you're very likely to be admitted to LaRoche if you apply. So the students would love it because they get the two things they want. They get to know the price, and they get to know that essentially it's pre-screened for admission, and the colleges would get inexpensive access to good students. So I think it can improve fit for both sides and improve access and affordability. And Terry has heard me talk about this a lot, and I'm always interested to hear his thoughts on it.
Well, I think for us on the college side, the beauty of it is really that we're able to go out, look at a student's profile, not only their academic profile, but their demographic, where are they coming from. It permits an institution, we're a regional institution, but it does open doors for us to have a little more reach in respect to the students that we think are good fits for us. So the beauty is that we're able to take a look at that and say, okay, we don't attract a lot of students from, let's say, Maryland, but these three students are from Maryland. They seem to have the fit that we're looking for. They definitely have the grades, the scores that would be admissible to the institution, and because of that, we can go out and preliminary say to them, based on the information you've supplied to us, you would be eligible for X amount of dollars in respect to Merit Aid. And it helps us for that student that may not be thinking of us. It permits us to begin a conversation with that student, encouraging them to apply, encouraging them to say, hey, this is an institution you may not have been thinking of, but you know what, we like what we see about you, and we would like to continue this conversation. So I think that's the real beauty from my side, is that it permits us to look at students and to have a reach that maybe typically we would not have. And that's, for us, that would be a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. A few questions. Terry, could you tell us a little bit about the lens through which admissions looks at a student in a smaller private university versus a large state university? How might a student's approach to applying or even searching for schools be different based on the size of the institution?
Oh, well, I guess when you're looking at, the public university I worked at was probably about almost 10 years ago. And we were looking for a freshman class of 2,800 students, but we were getting 21,000 applications. First things those students that we were looking at was what is the academics of that student? If they don't meet certain standards, then they're automatically put into the bin where, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to admit you. And so it's done in some ways a very mechanical way. It's not a personal approach. Where when I've worked at the smaller institutions I've worked at, LaRoche being one, a couple other Catholic institutions in the area, the applications coming in, and that application is really being looked at very, very closely. It's being reviewed not only by the counselor, but it ultimately ends up on my desk that I'm looking at it as well. So there's a real personal review where maybe a student has had some difficulty in their sophomore year because of an illness. That may not show up on a transcript, but in an essay, in a counselor recommendation that we're reading, we're able to do that. So it begins with that sort of personal approach that a smaller institution may take as compared to a larger institution. And not that the larger ones maybe don't or can't do that, but the volume that they deal with maybe prohibits them from doing some of that. But I think the approach for those students end up being very, very different because when you look at the profiles of those institutions, they're completely different institutions. And that's where it gets back. I know I always talk with families and students when one of the initial things I talk with the students about is tell me if you had to pick a perfect institution for you to attend, what does that institution look like? And sometimes they look at you like a deer in the headlights, but you know, it's what's that size? What's that location? What's your academic area of interest? What have you been involved in? Do you look to be involved in some things when you go on to your post-secondary education? So I think at a smaller institution, you can have that conversation a lot easier than you have at that larger institution. I hope I answered the question.
You did. Thank you. I have a question for Lyle. Can you tell us kind of what types of institutions are already using this higher admission system, or about how many are involved with this?
We have schools and colleges and universities from all over the country. They're all so far independent colleges. 15 of them have been recruiting at higher admission, and I can tell you the average merit aid offer is, I think it's $8,000. Colleges are recruiting out of their normal geographic comfort zone, and that's not the best word to use it. But colleges from California are recruiting students from Texas. So here's one really good example. It just so happens that in the Southwest United States, and to anybody that's on the call from the Southwest will know this, there's a lot more Catholic students than there are Catholic colleges. And in the Northeast, there's a ton of Catholic colleges and less Catholic, relatively less Catholic high school students as a ratio. So these schools try to, you know, they want to attract the students from out of their region to come there. So they recruit, and what the platform does is give the colleges access to those students that they would have a very difficult time otherwise gaining access to. So again, we have 15 colleges recruiting, and they're making significant merit aid offers, and the colleges that I work with are very pleased with the product, and the counselors and students are too. We have some fantastic students. I go through them all the time, and fantastic students. And the colleges are recruiting not just the top students. There's a whole range of students, and offering merit aid. I've been surprised at how much merit aid is offered to students that I kind of didn't realize that you don't have to be in the 99th percentile or the 90th percentile to get a significant merit aid offer from a college on the platform.
If a student were going to use this system, about how long does it take for them to get replies from colleges? This
is brand new, so colleges are not yet. Eventually, and maybe sooner rather than later, colleges will be going through the student pool of students on a consistent basis and finding new ones to invite. I'm reaching out to colleges when we get significant numbers of new students, and I remind them, hey, come onto the platform, invite some more students. So I think that is the kind of thing. There's a chicken and egg problem here. Students want to know how many colleges we have and how many offers are being made, and colleges want to know how many students we have. But everything I do now, because the platform is built and up and running, everything I do is getting more students and more colleges on board. So they won't have to wait, won't necessarily have to wait long, but it may not be immediate either. And the thing is, they can still keep going through with their regular process, and some of this may come later. You know, it could be that colleges come on board that it's later in the season, we're moving into March and April, and they haven't filled their seats, and they see some students on higher admission that they think they have an opportunity to recruit, and they reach out to them, and in some cases, I think students in that case might be very interested because maybe they didn't put enough research and effort into their match and safety schools, and now it's March, and it's too late, and they didn't get into their reach school, and they don't like the match school or safety school that they picked, and here comes somebody on the platform offering them something interesting.
So is this the type of service where maybe if they weren't interested in a particular school that was involved with higher admission, they could use those offers to leverage better deals with other schools?
In theory, they could. I mean, they can't do that on the platform, but students now, I'm sure Terry would back me up on this, they're always welcome to come into Terry's office and say to Terry, look, Slippery Rock, here's what Slippery Rock's offering me. Can you help me? I imagine that happens sometimes, right, Terry?
Yeah, it happens probably on a regular basis, and typically, and from my own experience with the institutions I've worked for, uh, an institution's not going to go out and do some matching until that student has a financial aid award from that other institution where there can be a comparison, because sometimes what we find is that if we compare a financial aid award of another institution against ours, but we look at the cost of attending, whatever it might be, we may find that our particular offer is actually better for the student. The net price is actually better for that student, for that family. But yeah, we do see that all the time. But typically what I would say, I would not say to a student, if a student walked to my office and said, hey, I've been on higher admissions and I got X amount from this institution, what can you do for me? Now, I can go out and look at their profile and say, this is what we can do for you. But typically, we're going to really talk about hard dollars down the road with all the other aid. We would have to wait to see a financial aid award to be able to do anything. Thank you.
We talked a little bit about, Catholic students and Catholic colleges. Other than the price alone, what barriers do either of you can jump in on this? Do you kind of see where students who have gone through Catholic schools are, for whatever reason, not transferring into Catholic universities down the road?
Well, if I can answer from my side, I think there are just so many options for students in respect to where they can go, what they may be interested in, whatever it might be. Obviously, when you talk about a Catholic institution, you're talking about a private institution where tuition is going to be higher than it may be at a state-related or a state university. So, when you begin looking at that, then costs can and does play into that decision. But I think with each family, it's an individual decision. With them being able to sit down and say, okay, what can we afford? Yes, we've sent you to a private institution all 12 years, but we have 2 or 3 siblings behind you that we still have to pay their education. So I think it becomes really an individual case. I don't know that there's any particular barriers that Catholic students would say, oh, I don't want to go there. I think it ultimately becomes about fit. Where do they best fit? And for many of them, it is at a Catholic institution, but for many of them, it's not at that private institution. It may be at a state related or a state university. Thank you.
I just think I would reinforce that and add to it that from my research and from talking, I talk to counselors all the time, and I think that two big things are money and information. So students they see that sticker price, and it's just not even the Catholic school in the area is not on their radar because the state school appears to be so much less expensive. And then there's just the information. The students don't. There's so many schools out there for students to research, and we all know that the high school senior has a lot on their plates, and they're very distracted with so many different things, so they're not sitting down and spending thoughtful time looking at all the possibilities for themselves, and they just don't realize that there's a fantastic Catholic school, 15 miles away that might be a perfect fit for them. They just don't get the information. I mean, students are, I think, so overwhelmed with all the things that are happening in their senior year. I've recently been reading about students picking colleges based on the one that had the best Instagram account. So I think students are unreliable researchers of schools, so they lack information. But on the platform that I'm proposing and that I've built actually is that schools like La Roche can get a very good document in front of a student. So when La Roche sends an invitation to a student, what that invitation says is, look, here's your merit aid that we know you're eligible for based on your stated credentials. Here's our net price calculator. Now, look, student, you know that if you apply, you're very likely to be admitted. Here's what your merit aid is. It's worth it now to you to spend the half hour that it will take to do to complete our net price calculator, and then you'll really know how you're going to pay for it. So even though LaRoche's all-in cost might be, I'm not sure what it is, Terry, I'm going to say $30,000. Once they get through that process, once they see the merit aid number and then they get through the net price calculator, they see, oh, wow, we can do this. We can make this happen. But then that invitation from LaRoche, students these days expect everything to come to them electronically. They don't read paper. My kids have a stack of mail sitting on our kitchen counter that every 6 months I just throw it all out because they don't even open it. And I have to make them open mail from relatives, let alone junk mail. So the invitation to the student is an electronic document that after we get through the pricing part, it includes a link to LaRoche's rankings in U.S. News and World Report, in Niche's report on LaRoche, the Department of Education's report on LaRoche, links to LaRoche's Instagram. So if they want to decide on Instagram, they can. It's right there in front of them. They click on LaRoche's Instagram account, and I've been to LaRoche's Instagram account, and I can tell you it's a very good-looking. There's a lot of good-looking stuff on there, so that might be a good decision for kids going for LaRoche. But anyway, I'm kidding about that. But this electronic document that the kid gets that's a great place for them to start their research on the schools, and that can be a great way to match Catholic high school students with Catholic colleges. And just, I mean, if 10 schools send invitations to one of your students, just think about the amount of merit aid that is going to be attributable, can be calculated as our students got X amount of merit aid. Does that answer your question?
If I could add just one thing, being a Catholic institution ourselves, we value that a family has chosen to send their son or daughter to a Catholic secondary school for their education. And even though we may be offering a merit award, ourselves and some other Catholic institutions look at that and put a value on that student has attended a Catholic secondary school. And we're able to actually, something we call stacking, we're able to stack a Catholic high school award on top of their merit award because they have attended a Catholic high school and because we are a Catholic institution. So it adds a little added value to that merit award. That student would be looking at getting some additional dollars per year over the 4 years. And again, we're not the only institution that does that, but it's a way for us to recognize that family has made that decision and thought that decision to send their son or daughter to a Catholic high school was very, very important to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to add, a little bit to that. It's a great way, I think, Terry, and everybody of maybe keeping some of the kids from slipping through the cracks that might be good potential students, but they don't necessarily have the family support. And I know the people on this call, your students do have the counselor support, but there's a lot of, I forget what the ratio is. It's either 300 or 500 to 1 in the public school system of counselor to students. So if there's a self-identified, because on the platform students, they have the option of identifying themselves as Catholic. If there's a self-identified Catholic student at a public college that doesn't have any guidance counselor support, may not have any family support, but they did relatively well on their standardized tests and they're relatively decent students, great thing for them to be able to do is spend 15 minutes on entering that essential data, and maybe they won't slip through the cracks, and maybe they'll get to a place that's good for them.
Gentlemen, either of you can jump in on this one too. How has kind of the trend for schools going test optional affected the type of awards that are being offered to students?
Do you want to go ahead, Terry?
Oh, go ahead, Lyle. Go.
The test optional thing, I think, is a huge mixed bag. I think that a lot of schools, they're test optional, but for example, George Washington in Washington, D.C. just went test optional, and I'm in McLean, Virginia, just outside of D.C., so I'm very familiar with them. But really, 90% of the students still provide test scores. So it's not making a lot of sense to me how this test optional thing is working. I guess they'll go through a few of those test optional students and maybe, but I think in a lot of cases it's just because rankings are dependent on the percentage of students that are rejected, and colleges do that to some extent. I know this is a bit cynical, but I think they do it to increase the number of applications they get. And again, they might have some good reasons. I'm sure they do have some good reasons for doing it too, but I'm very skeptical about that. And I think that a student that tries to get in, I think relying on a test optional school for a student's financial aid, for a student's admission and financial aid packages is not a good strategy for any student to rely on.
Yeah,
Terry, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, again, I think test optional, and it's growing. I mean, there are, 400 plus institutions out there, post-secondary institutions that are now what they call test optional. But, I think the student needs to really investigate what that means. We have a couple institutions here in the Pittsburgh area that are test optional. Some of them are test optional 100%. There's another institution that only students that would be coming into arts and sciences are test optional. All the other colleges or schools within that institution still have to submit SAT scores or ACT scores to do those kinds of things. So I think the student needs to investigate what that really means. But at the same time, it may permit a student to have an option to them that they didn't think was available to them. But in respect to merit aid, we've had that discussion here about do we go test optional. But what that means is that there has to be another way for us to evaluate how that student or what kind of merit money are we going to offer that student. Do we offer it just on the GPA? Do we offer it by the student having to submit this particular writing sample? Whatever it might be, there ends up being other mechanisms that those institutions are using to determine that particular aid. And if I can add one thing, there is an institution in the area here that has gone to admitting students without submitting a transcript. The student self-reports everything that they have, their test scores, their grades, all of those things, and based on that information, that institution accepts or denies that student. Ultimately, if they decide to attend, they have to submit a transcript, and then they verify the information. But it's a small trend, but it's a trend that we see happening, that some institutions are going that way in respect to admitting students to their institution. Thank you.
Well, I think that those are our final questions. Did you have any last words before we conclude, either one of you gentlemen?
I just would hope that you'll take a look at the platform at Higher Admission, and I'm available anytime for questions or calls, emails, text messages. All the information is there, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody at any time.
Any final words, Terry?
Yeah, just from a college standpoint, I mean, it's nice. The platform permits us here in Pittsburgh to be able to look at the profile of students, again, out of our geographic area, but students that we think are good fits for us. And obviously, ultimately, it's all about fit. But I think the platform permits us to do that, and it's just a nice way for us to be able to reach students that maybe we typically would not be able to reach. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we conclude today's webinar, I invite you all to visit our website at ncea.org to see listings for both upcoming webinars and professional development activities. Thank you for spending time with us today, and thank you, Lyle and Terry, for all that you've shared with us. As a reminder, we'll be sending you this recorded webinar and presentation slides in another day or two by email. Thank you again, and may you enjoy a good evening. God bless.